Hello everyone, this is Rabbi David Zirkind from the Riverdale Jewish Center with another installment of our weekly Parsha video. This Shabbos we'll read Parshat Beshalach. We'll celebrate Shabbos Shira together. Parshat Beshalach is a little bit of a roller coaster. The Jewish people are at the Yam Suf and they're being pursued by the Egyptians only to be saved by the greatest miracle of the Exodus. At the very end of the Parsha, we're confronted with the challenge of going to war with Amalek and a miraculous victory led by Yoshua with Moshe on top of the mountain. And in between, we find another kind of challenge where the Jews are quarreling amongst themselves and with their leadership about the experience of living in the desert, of searching for food and for water, and how they handle it or come up short in dealing with these issues as a people. In other words, there are essentially two poles to life in the Midbar that begin in Parshat Beshalach and continue on through the rest of Sefer Shemos, and we read about it more, of course, in Sefer Bamidbar. On the one hand, when the Jewish people are faced with existential threats from the outside, they are forced to come together and fight shoulder to shoulder for Jewish survival. And then when we're left to our own devices, unfortunately, the Jewish people often fall short in quarreling with one another about how to handle the problems they face internally as a people. The reality that Jews face both of these crises is reflected in our Parsha, but is very much alive in our moment as well. We have these moments as American Jews and internationally as well that we're thinking about, especially on Holocaust Remembrance Week this week, about our need to come together to prevent further genocide, to prevent anti-Semitism, to make sure that the lessons of the Holocaust are never forgotten. And we do that very well. As a nation, we find ways to come together and to unify, to confront these existential threats. And at the same time, we have these Mei Meriva kind of moments where the Jewish people are left to their own devices, and we don't seem to know how to navigate internal challenges on our own. The pandemic is probably the best example, and frankly, this week it's a painful example. If you look at the newspapers here in the United States, or if you're reading the news on the internet about what's going on in Israel, we know that figuring out the relationship between our Orthodox community and the Haredi community and how we navigate the pandemic has not been ideal. It is fair to criticize our fellow Jews, and it is necessary to object when other communities are doing things that look badly on themselves and then reflect badly on us as well. But it's hard, on the one hand, to commit ourselves to unity, to recognize the need for unity in confronting the existential threats of what it means to be a Jew in the 21st century, just like it did in the times of the Exodus. And at the same time, figuring out a way to communicate with one another about internal issues so that we can stick together when we need each other most. I don't know if there's a perfect solution. We certainly don't seem to have one. But we need to be sensitive to our consistency. We need to maintain that sense of unity with our fellow Jews, even in these moments of disappointment, because the existential threats to Jewish people stand on both sides of it, just as they do in our Parsha. Unfortunately, we see in the papers this week disappointment from our other communities and anger, and at times negativity, stereotypes, disrespect that some might think is warranted, but at the same time is so damaging to the long-term message of who we are. How do we figure out a way to criticize each other for the things we disagree about, but not compromise our sense of unity, our willingness to stand shoulder to shoulder to remind ourselves that these are our brothers and sisters, even in moments of rebuke or moments of criticism? To me, that's what Parshat Beshalach is all about. The constant swaying back and forth between that sense of unity that we all know we need to survive and that sense of difference that often reflects itself in our worst moments. I'm not sure there's a perfect solution. I certainly don't have one in this week's video, but I think there's a lot to be said about reminding ourselves in a time when our nation is calling for unity but hasn't figured out how to execute on that plan. The same is exactly true for us as Jews. We know the importance of unity. We celebrate being Ki'ish Echad B'Lev Echad, but we haven't quite figured out how to execute it. Certainly not when the times are tough. And I think there's a moment to pause and a real call to action to make sure precisely in the moments where we feel division, where we feel separation, and when we feel disappointment in other segments of our Jewish community, that we need to be careful how we talk about it. Let's not forget how essential Jewish unity is to our survival, and in these moments where we feel fracture and difference, we have to work twice as hard to sustain that unity so that this community can come together and be the strongest it possibly can. I want to wish everybody a wonderful Shabbos Shira, a wonderful Parshat Beshalach, and a great weekend. We hope to see you back at the RJC very soon.